Sit down and stay where you belong. The words cut through the first-class cabin so sharply that even the soft hum of the aircraft seemed to disappear. At 8:17 a.m., Flight 717 from Chicago to Los Angeles was still boarding, and until that moment, everything had felt ordinary. Business travelers checked emails. Families settled into their seats. Flight attendants moved through the aisle with practiced smiles. Then 10-year-old Jaden Carter stepped away from seat 3A and changed the atmosphere of the entire plane. Jaden wasn't running. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't bothering anyone. Dressed in a navy hoodie, clean sneakers, and a backpack nearly as large as his shoulders, he simply stood near the galley waiting for permission to use the restroom. He had been taught to ask first. He had been taught to be respectful. He had been taught to never make trouble. But respect wasn't what Chief Flight Attendant Nicole Whitman saw when she looked at him. Nicole stopped in the aisle and stared at the boy as if he had crossed an invisible line. Her expression hardened immediately. Nearby passengers exchanged glances. Something about the tension felt wrong. "I told you to sit down," Nicole said again, louder this time. Jaden blinked in confusion. "Ma'am, I was just asking if I could. You heard me." Her voice sliced through the cabin. Conversation stopped. A man lowered his newspaper. A woman removed one earbud. The mood shifted all at once. Jaden stood frozen. Not because he was afraid, but because he genuinely didn't understand why she was angry. He had followed every instruction since boarding. His boarding pass had been checked twice. His identification bracelet for unaccompanied minors was clearly visible on his wrist. Yet Nicole looked at him as though he didn't belong on the aircraft at all. Across the aisle, a young flight attendant named Mia Thompson paused while loading carry-on bags into an overhead bin. She noticed the exchange immediately. Something in Nicole's tone made her stomach tighten. The boy wasn't causing a problem. Everyone could see that. Yet Nicole continued staring at him with growing irritation. "Kids like you always think the rules don't apply," she said. The words hung in the air. Several passengers visibly reacted. One businessman frowned. An elderly woman near the window shook her head slowly. Jaden lowered his eyes for a second, then looked back up. His father had always told him that dignity starts with how you carry yourself when other people forget theirs. So he remained calm. He remained polite. He remained exactly where he was. The silence that followed felt heavier than the aircraft itself. Nicole took one step closer. The confidence in her posture suggested she believed nobody would challenge her. Nobody would question her authority. Nobody would care what happened next. But all across the cabin, people were already watching. And what none of them, not Nicole, not the passengers, not even Mia, could possibly know was that within minutes, one phone call would turn this ordinary morning flight into the most expensive mistake of Nicole Whitman's career. Jaden Carter returned to seat 3A without arguing. He did not complain. He did not roll his eyes. He simply buckled his seat belt and folded his hands in his lap. That alone confused several passengers who had been watching the exchange. Most children his age would have reacted differently. Some would have cried. Some would have protested. Jaden didn't either. He stared quietly out the window as airport vehicles moved across the tarmac beneath a gray Chicago morning sky. The aircraft door remained open. More passengers continued boarding. Yet the tension Nicole Whitman had created refused to leave the cabin. It lingered like a storm cloud trapped between the rows. Nicole walked away with the confidence of someone who believed the situation was finished. In her mind, she had restored order. In reality, she had only drawn attention to herself. Across the aisle, a middle-aged attorney named Rachel Morgan lowered her tablet and watched the boy carefully. She had spent 20 years reading people for a living. What stood out was not anger. It was discipline. The kind of discipline usually taught by someone intentional. Someone successful. Someone who understood pressure. Jaden sat with his backpack resting beneath the seat in front of him. Attached to one zipper was a small metal keychain engraved with a simple letter C. Nothing flashy. Nothing expensive. Yet everything about the child suggested stability. His clothes were clean. His posture was confident. Even the way he thanked a passing flight attendant who offered him water felt unusually mature. Nearby passengers began exchanging quiet observations. Something about the situation did not make sense. Then Mia Thompson noticed something else. While assisting a family several rows behind first class, she glanced at the passenger manifest displayed on her service tablet. Jaden Carter's profile carried a notation she had never seen attached to an unaccompanied minor before. A small gold marker appeared beside his reservation. Not a celebrity designation. Not a government designation. Something else. She leaned closer to the screen. Before she could read further, Nicole appeared beside her. "Focus on your responsibilities," Nicole said sharply. Mia immediately looked away. But curiosity had already taken hold. Back in seat 3A, Jaden reached into his backpack and removed a worn hardcover notebook. The edges showed signs of use. Several pages were filled with handwritten notes. He flipped through them carefully before stopping on a page covered with quotations. One sentence sat at the top in neat black ink. "Dignity is not something people give you. It is something you refuse to surrender." The words came from his father. Jaden read them often, especially on difficult days. He traced the sentence with one finger before closing the notebook. Across the cabin, Nicole noticed the movement and frowned again. Something about the boy seemed to irritate her beyond reason. She could not explain it. She only knew she disliked the calmness. She disliked the confidence. Most of all, she disliked that the attention of the cabin had shifted away from her authority and toward a quiet 10-year-old sitting in seat 3A. And as Flight 717 prepared for departure, nobody realized that the smallest passenger on board was connected to a story far bigger than the aircraft itself. The aircraft finally pushed back from the gate, and the safety demonstration began. Most passengers turned their attention to seat belts and exit rows, but Nicole Whitman seemed unable to let go of whatever irritation she felt toward Jaden Carter. The moment the demonstration ended, she walked directly toward row 3. Her heels clicked against the cabin floor with deliberate precision. Several passengers noticed immediately. Rachel Morgan looked up from her tablet again. Mia Thompson paused near the galley. Even a businessman seated across the aisle shifted in his seat as Nicole stopped beside Jaden. "Let me see that notebook," Nicole said. The request came without explanation. Jaden looked up calmly. "Why?" Nicole's expression tightened. "Because I asked for it." The cabin grew quieter. Jaden glanced down at the notebook resting on his lap. "It is just my notebook." "Then you should not have a problem showing it to me." Her voice carried farther than necessary. A few passengers exchanged uncomfortable looks. Jaden hesitated before handing it over. Nicole flipped through the pages as if searching for evidence of something she could not define. Quotes, notes, drawings of airplanes, a list of books he wanted to read before middle school. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious. Yet she continued turning pages with visible skepticism. Finally, she closed it and placed it on the service cart beside her. "You can have it back later," she said. Jaden blinked. "That belongs to me. And right now it stays here." The answer landed heavily across the row. Rachel lowered her tablet completely. The businessman across the aisle frowned openly. Nicole ignored both reactions. She turned and walked away with the notebook still sitting on the cart. Jaden watched it disappear toward the galley. For the first time, disappointment crossed his face. Not anger, not fear, just disappointment. The notebook mattered to him. It contained years of thoughts, lessons, and goals. His father often called it his personal roadmap. 20 minutes passed. The aircraft climbed above the clouds, leveling at cruising altitude. Sunlight poured through the windows, turning the cabin bright and calm. But beneath that calm, frustration continued building among the passengers who had witnessed the exchange. Then Nicole returned. This time she stopped beside Jaden again. "You will remain seated for the rest of the flight," she announced. "No wandering around. No unnecessary requests. Is that understood?" Jaden looked genuinely confused. "I was not wandering. Do not argue." Her response came instantly. Across the aisle, Rachel finally spoke. "He has been sitting quietly this entire time." Nicole turned toward her. "Ma'am, please focus on your own seat." The temperature in the cabin seemed to drop. Rachel stared back in disbelief. Nicole's confidence remained intact, but the support around her was beginning to disappear. More passengers were paying attention now. More passengers were questioning what they were seeing. Near the galley, Mia quietly reopened the passenger manifest on her tablet. The gold marker beside Jaden's name was still there. This time she clicked deeper into the profile. Her eyes widened. She only managed to read a few words before Nicole's voice echoed across the cabin again. "Mia, stop what you are doing and help in first class." Mia quickly closed the screen. But what she had seen was enough to make her heart race. Because whatever secret was attached to Jaden Carter's reservation, it was far bigger than anyone on Flight 717 realized. For the next 30 minutes, Mia Thompson could not stop thinking about what she had seen on the screen. She moved through the cabin serving drinks and answering passenger requests, but her attention kept returning to the same question. Who was Jaden Carter? The gold designation beside his reservation was unlike anything she had encountered during training. It was not assigned to celebrities. It was not assigned to politicians. It belonged to a category accessible only to senior airline leadership. The realization sat in the back of her mind like a warning light. Meanwhile, Jaden remained in seat 3A. He sat quietly, looking out the window as endless white clouds stretched across the horizon. The notebook still had not been returned. Neither had anyone explained why it had been taken. Around him, passengers had begun treating him differently, not because they knew who he was, but because they could see he had been treated unfairly. Rachel Morgan offered him a warm smile when their eyes met. An older veteran seated 2 rows behind nodded respectfully whenever Jaden looked his way. Small gestures, quiet gestures, but they mattered. Nicole Whitman noticed them too. Her expression hardened every time she saw another passenger showing kindness toward the boy. It was as though the sympathy he received only fueled her frustration. Near the front galley, Mia finally found an opportunity to reopen the manifest. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen. This time she navigated deeper into the profile before anyone could interrupt. The words that appeared made her breath catch. Executive family clearance. Direct corporate contact authorization. Priority escalation protocol. Mia stared at the screen. Then she saw a name attached to the emergency contact section. Marcus Carter. Something about the name felt familiar. Very familiar. Before she could think further, a shadow crossed over the tablet. Nicole stood beside her. What exactly are you looking at? Mia quickly locked the screen. Nothing important. Nicole narrowed her eyes. Then stopped wasting time. Her voice carried the same sharp edge passengers had come to recognize throughout the flight. Mia nodded, but the moment Nicole walked away, she discreetly activated the audio recorder on her phone. She did not know why. She only knew something felt wrong. Very wrong. Back in row 3, another passenger finally spoke up. "Excuse me," said the veteran. "The young man has been sitting quietly the entire flight. Why has his property not been returned?" Nicole stopped in the aisle. Several heads turned immediately. The cabin had been waiting for someone to ask. Her smile appeared instantly, but it never reached her eyes. "Sir, we are handling the situation appropriately." "What situation?" the veteran asked. The question landed like a stone in still water. Nicole opened her mouth, but did not answer immediately. Because there was no situation. There was only a quiet 10-year-old boy and a growing number of witnesses beginning to realize it. And for the first time since takeoff, Nicole looked less certain than before while Mia quietly saved the recording and watched the entire cabin begin shifting against her. The veteran's question lingered in the air long after the conversation ended. Nicole Whitman walked away without providing an answer, but the silence she left behind felt louder than any explanation. Flight 717 continued westward above the clouds, yet the atmosphere inside the cabin had changed completely. Passengers were no longer watching movies or scrolling through their phones. They were watching each other. More specifically, they were watching how a quiet 10-year-old boy was being treated. Jaden Carter sat motionless beside the window, his reflection faintly visible against the bright sky outside. He looked calm, but his thoughts had drifted somewhere else entirely. He remembered a summer afternoon 2 years earlier at a small marina outside Charleston. The air had smelled like salt water and fresh paint. He had been sitting beside his father on a wooden dock, swinging his legs above the water while boats drifted across the harbor. Marcus Carter had pointed toward the horizon and asked a simple question. "What is the one thing nobody can take from you?" Jaden had guessed money, then success, then education. Each answer earned a smile, but not a nod. Finally, Marcus shook his head and said, "Your dignity. People will try to define you before they know you. They will judge you before they understand you. Never let them decide your worth." Jaden had never forgotten those words. They had followed him through every difficult moment since. Now, sitting 30,000 feet above the ground, he repeated them silently to himself. Never let them decide your worth. Across the cabin, Mia Thompson watched him from the galley. The more she observed, the less sense the situation made. The boy was composed, respectful, patient, everything the airline claimed to value in its passengers. Yet he was being treated as though he had done something wrong simply by existing. Her phone continued recording quietly from her apron pocket. She was not sure what she might need later, but instinct told her not to stop. Near row 3, Rachel Morgan leaned toward the veteran and spoke softly. "He reminds me of my grandson." The veteran nodded. "He reminds me of someone who was taught character." Neither realized Jaden could hear them. Their words brought the faintest smile to his face. It disappeared moments later when Nicole emerged from the galley carrying the service cart. Sitting on the top shelf, partially hidden beneath a stack of napkins, was Jaden's notebook. He noticed it immediately. So did several passengers. Nicole noticed their attention as well. Her jaw tightened. For a brief second, her eyes met Jaden's. Neither spoke, yet something passed between them. One person trying to maintain control, another refusing to surrender self-respect. And as the aircraft continued toward Los Angeles, the invisible line dividing the cabin grew sharper than ever. While the name Marcus Carter continued echoing in Mia's mind like a warning she could no longer ignore. Nearly 2 hours into the flight, the cabin had settled into an uneasy quiet. The engines droned steadily overhead, but beneath the routine sounds of air travel, tension remained alive. Nicole Whitman continued moving through the aisle with practiced efficiency, yet every glance she cast toward row 3 seemed sharper than the last. Jaden Carter noticed it. So did everyone else. His notebook still sat on the service cart near the galley. Nobody could explain why. Nobody could justify it. Yet somehow it remained there, like a symbol of a problem that should never have existed. Jaden looked toward the cart one more time before reaching into his backpack. Inside was a small phone approved for unaccompanied travel. He stared at it for several seconds. Not because he was afraid to use it, because he had been taught to solve problems on his own whenever possible. His father believed independence built character. But he had also taught him something else. Know the difference between handling a problem and allowing one to continue. The words returned to him clearly. Across the aisle, Rachel Morgan noticed him holding the phone. She said nothing. The veteran 2 rows back noticed as well. Neither interrupted. Something told them the moment mattered. Jaden unlocked the screen and opened his contacts. There was one number pinned at the very top. Dad. The aircraft continued west through clear skies while his thumb hovered over the call button. Then he pressed it. The phone rang once. Twice. Less than 3 seconds later, the call connected. "Hey, buddy," came a calm voice. Deep, confident, familiar. The sound alone seemed to ease the tension in Jaden's shoulders. For the first time all flight, he looked his age. "Dad." Marcus Carter immediately heard something different in his son's voice. What happened? There was no panic. No dramatic explanation. No long speech. Jaden simply looked toward the galley where his notebook remained and answered quietly. "I think I need your help." Several rows away, Mia Thompson froze. She had not intended to listen, but the words carried farther than expected. "Are you okay?" Marcus asked. "Yes." "Are you safe?" "Yes." A brief pause followed. Then Jaden spoke again. "A flight attendant took my notebook. She keeps saying I do not belong here." Silence filled the line for a moment. Not angry silence. Focused silence. The kind that arrives before a decision. Marcus finally asked one question. "What is her name?" Jaden glanced toward the front of the cabin. "Nicole Whitman." Mia's heart skipped. Rachel looked up. Even the veteran shifted slightly in his seat. Nobody knew why the simple exchange felt so important. On the other end of the call, Marcus Carter remained calm. Too calm. "Okay," he said. "Listen carefully. Keep your seatbelt on. Stay respectful. Do exactly what you have been doing." Jaden nodded. "I will." "And buddy." "Yeah. You did nothing wrong." The faint smile that appeared on Jaden's face changed something in the cabin. It was small, almost invisible, yet it carried more confidence than any argument ever could. Marcus ended the call moments later. No threats. No raised voice. No promises. Just a quiet goodbye. But thousands of feet below, in a corporate office overlooking downtown Los Angeles, Marcus Carter was already standing from his desk. And as Nicole continued moving through the aisle believing the flight was nearly over, she had no idea that the most important passenger, connected to Flight 717, had just received a phone call. The remainder of the flight passed beneath a layer of quiet anticipation that nobody could quite explain. Nicole Whitman continued her duties as if nothing had changed, but the confidence she had displayed earlier was beginning to crack. Every time she looked toward row 3, she found passengers watching her, not openly challenging her, simply watching. The kind of attention that makes people uncomfortable when they know their actions have been noticed. Jaden Carter remained calm. He spent most of the descent looking out the window as the California coastline appeared beneath the clouds. The notebook still sat near the galley. Mia Thompson continued recording observations whenever she could. Rachel Morgan and the veteran exchanged occasional glances. The entire cabin felt suspended between two moments. One that had already happened and another that had not arrived yet. Then the captain announced their approach into Los Angeles. Seat belts clicked into place throughout the aircraft. The city stretched endlessly below, sunlight reflecting off glass towers and busy freeways. Within minutes, the wheels touched the runway. The aircraft rolled smoothly toward the terminal. Nicole seemed relieved. Whatever concern had briefly appeared on her face during the flight vanished as soon as they reached the gate. In her mind, the situation was over. Passengers would leave. Complaints would fade. Life would continue. The aircraft door opened. Most travelers expected the usual routine. Instead, something unusual happened. Nobody was allowed to begin deplaning immediately. A group of sharply dressed executives appeared outside the aircraft entrance. 3 men, 2 women, airline security supervisors, senior operations managers. They stood waiting in complete silence. Confusion spread through the cabin. Nicole noticed them first. Her posture straightened immediately. She assumed a corporate inspection team had arrived for a routine visit. Flight crews occasionally encountered leadership during major travel periods. There was nothing unusual about that, or so she thought. Then another figure appeared behind the group. Tall, calm, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit. His presence changed the atmosphere before he spoke a single word. Mia saw him first. Her eyes widened instantly. Rachel looked toward the aircraft door and nearly dropped her tablet. Even the veteran sat forward in his seat. Recognition moved through the front rows like electricity. Nicole smiled politely, preparing to greet what she assumed was an important executive visitor. But the man never looked at her. Not once. His attention moved directly through the cabin until it reached seat 3A. Jaden saw him and smiled immediately. The kind of smile only a child gives someone they completely trust. The man stepped forward. The executives followed several feet behind. Every conversation inside the aircraft stopped. Every passenger watched. Nicole finally noticed where he was looking. Her smile faded. The man walked past first class, past the galley, past the service cart where Jaden's notebook still rested. Then he stopped beside row 3. Jaden stood. The man placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder and asked only one question. "You doing okay, buddy?" Jaden nodded. "I am now." The man smiled gently before turning toward the front of the aircraft. And for the first time all day, Nicole Whitman heard the name that made every executive standing behind him immediately straighten their posture. Marcus Carter had arrived. The moment Marcus Carter's name settled over the cabin, the balance of power shifted completely. Nicole Whitman stood frozen beside the galley. Her expression changed from confidence to confusion in a matter of seconds. Around her, the executives who had entered the aircraft remained silent, allowing the reality of the moment to unfold on its own. Marcus did not raise his voice. He did not make a scene. He simply looked around the cabin, taking in every detail. His eyes paused briefly on the service cart. There, resting beneath a stack of napkins, was Jaden's notebook. Marcus walked toward it and picked it up carefully. The worn cover showed years of use. He handed it back to his son without saying a word. Jaden accepted it with a grateful smile. That small exchange somehow carried more weight than any confrontation could have. Several passengers looked away, uncomfortable with what they were beginning to understand. Marcus finally turned toward Nicole. The silence became absolute. "You are Nicole Whitman?" he asked. Nicole swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." Marcus nodded once. "My son told me you spent this flight making him feel like he did not belong here." Nicole immediately searched for an explanation. "Sir, there has been a misunderstanding." Before she could continue, another voice interrupted. There was no misunderstanding. Every head turned toward Mia Thompson. The young flight attendant stepped forward holding her phone. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. "I witnessed everything." Nicole stared at her in disbelief. Mia continued. "Multiple passengers witnessed everything." Rachel Morgan stood next. Then the veteran. Then 2 more travelers seated nearby. One after another, people who had remained quiet throughout the flight finally spoke. The cabin became a chorus of facts. Not opinions. Facts. A notebook taken without explanation. A child singled out repeatedly. Comments that should never have been made. Questions that had never been answered. Nicole's posture weakened with every account. Marcus listened without interrupting. He listened the same way successful leaders listen during board meetings. Calmly, carefully, completely. When everyone finished speaking, he looked toward one of the senior executives standing near the aircraft door. Have you reviewed the flight reports? The executive nodded. Yes, sir. Have you reviewed the passenger statements? Yes, sir. And the crew recordings? Yes, sir. A long silence followed. Nicole's face lost its color. For the first time, she realized this was not about a complaint. It was about accountability. Marcus turned back toward her. His voice remained measured. The problem is not that you did not know who my son was. He paused. Every passenger leaned forward slightly. The problem is how you treated a child when you believed nobody important was watching. The words landed harder than anger ever could. Nicole lowered her eyes. No response came. No defense remained. Around the cabin, executives quietly began documenting statements. Security supervisors exchanged brief nods. Procedures were already moving forward. And while Nicole stood surrounded by the consequences of her decisions, Marcus Carter remained focused on only one thing. His son. Because the lesson unfolding inside Flight 717 had never been about power. It had always been about character. The cabin remained still long after Marcus Carter finished speaking. Nobody rushed to leave. Nobody seemed interested in connecting flights or baggage claims. For a few rare moments, an entire aircraft full of strangers shared the same realization. What had happened during the flight should never have happened at all. The silence that lingered was not uncomfortable. It was reflective. The kind of silence that follows a difficult truth when people finally stop defending their assumptions and start examining them. Marcus looked down at Jaden and adjusted the strap of his backpack. The gesture was simple, almost ordinary, yet it reminded everyone watching that beneath the titles, the executive teams, and the authority, he was first a father. Jaden held his notebook close against his chest. The familiar weight of it felt reassuring. It had traveled with him through countless school days, family trips, and quiet afternoons. Today, somehow, it felt more important than ever. Nearby passengers began quietly gathering their belongings, but many paused before stepping into the aisle. Rachel Morgan approached first. You handled yourself with more grace than most adults would have, she told Jaden. The veteran nodded in agreement. Your father taught you well. Jaden smiled politely. Thank you. One by one, other passengers offered similar words. Not because of who his father was, because of who he had been throughout the flight. Calm, respectful, steady. The qualities people often claim to admire but rarely recognize in real time. Several passengers found themselves thinking about their own children. Others thought about moments when they had remained silent instead of speaking up. More than one person wondered whether they would have shown the same composure if they had been in Jaden's position. Near the aircraft entrance, senior executives continued documenting statements and reviewing procedures. Decisions were already underway. Accountability would follow established company policies. Reports would be filed. Interviews would be conducted. Procedures would be reviewed. Yet everyone involved understood that no document could fully capture the lesson that had unfolded inside the cabin. Marcus never asked for special treatment. He never demanded public humiliation. He simply expected the same standard he required from every employee across the organization. Respect, fairness, professionalism. Before leaving the aircraft, Marcus turned toward the gathered executives one final time. Make sure every employee understands this lesson, he said. Not because of my son, because of every passenger who walks through our doors. Several executives nodded immediately. They understood. The issue had never been about status. It had never been about influence. It had never been about discovering that the child belonged to a powerful family. The real issue was how easily assumptions can replace judgment when people stop seeing the humanity in front of them. The executives exchanged brief glances. Each knew that trust, once damaged, required more than policy changes to repair. It required culture. It required leadership. It required people willing to challenge unfairness before it became accepted as normal. As passengers finally began exiting the aircraft, Mia Thompson remained near the galley. Marcus paused beside her. Thank you for speaking up, he said. Mia looked surprised. I was just doing what was right. Marcus smiled. That is exactly why it matters. For a second, Mia felt the weight of those words settle deeply within her. Throughout her career, she had received performance reviews, awards, and compliments from supervisors. Yet somehow this brief conversation felt more meaningful than all of them. After she walked away, Mia realized she would remember those words for the rest of her career. Outside the terminal windows, the California sun reflected across the runways while another day of flights continued as usual. Aircraft landed. Others departed. Travelers hurried through terminals chasing schedules and connections. To the outside world, nothing extraordinary had happened. But for everyone aboard that aircraft, something had changed. They had witnessed the difference between authority and character. One can be assigned. The other must be earned. Marcus and Jaden eventually walked toward the terminal together, side by side. No cameras followed them. No speeches waited ahead. Just a father and his son moving forward. Before disappearing into the crowd, Jaden looked up and asked, "Dad, were you angry?" Marcus thought for a moment. Then he answered with the same calm certainty that had guided him throughout the day. "No, I was disappointed. Anger passes. Standards stay." Jaden nodded thoughtfully. The lesson settled between them as they continued walking. He understood that his father was teaching him something larger than what had happened on the airplane. Standards were not rules for other people. They were principles you carried with you even when nobody was watching. And perhaps that was the real ending. Not a punishment. Not a title. Not even a victory. Just a reminder that true character is revealed by how people treat those they believe cannot benefit them. Because power is not measured by how you treat executives, celebrities, or owners. Power is revealed by how you treat the quiet person in front of you when you think nobody important is watching. And long after the flight faded into memory, that truth would remain with everyone who had witnessed it, serving as a quiet reminder that respect is never owed to status alone, but to the shared humanity that exists in every person who walks through the world hoping simply to be seen fairly.